All right. Yes. Thank you for reminding me. And just
Okay. Yep,
Lauren,
sorry.
can you have
Yes.
people put their names or their grades again, please?
Yeah, so what we are asking you to do just as we get started is scroll over your image, your camera, and you'll see mute and then 3 dots. If you click on the 3 dots, what we're asking you just to scroll down to rename and to put your first and last name, but also what grade you're teaching, because that will come into play a little bit later in our session.
Okay, sorry, just to stop you for 1 second. Julie, the recording piece, I'm just getting a spinning wheel of death and it's saying connecting to cloud server. So is that a problem?
No, it should work.
It looks like it's recording on our end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to get started. Today's about assessment. We are going to be actually talking a little bit about more kind of formalized summative assessment tomorrow. Today, what you'll see is kind of a little bit more assessment to guide your instruction. So what we're going to do, once again, we're going to go to the Jamboard. If you're new here, I'll kind of walk you through it with a couple leading questions for today. So our questions are, how does assessment guide your writing instruction, so currently? And what's tricky about it? So if you're new to our group, what you're going to do is you're going to scroll down to where you see the little sticky note under the cursor icon, and then you are going to write whatever it is that you have to say, push save, and then you can put it wherever you like. That makes sense? So we'll give you just a couple of minutes to reflect on these questions and get your feedback about it. Can somebody send the link for the, I can send the link for the Jamboard.
Yes. Okay. I'm just dealing with people having access. I just want to remind everyone, because I saw, Colleen, you went out and in. If you haven't done the latest update on Zoom, this is one of the common problems. People are being kicked out of the Zoom. So when you are in Zoom, make sure that you've got the latest version, which is like 5.0, and that should be fine.
Lauren and Julie, just so you know, when I look at the list of participants, I don't have anybody that has names and grades beside it. And I still have that spinning wheel. So I'm not sure that the system's refreshing for me.
Okay. So Julie, if you might get you to do.
Okay, so Jody, so I'll take care of the.
To change to the, you're gonna host then, Julie?
Yes.
Okay, we're coming in now.
Are you seeing differently?
Yeah, everyone's got it. I'm going to ask Sonia to add your grade level next to your name, same as DMC. Just add your grade level. Lisa, just add the name of the room you'd like to be part of. Okay, Lauren, do you want to start addressing some of the
Yeah, so I'm just looking at some of the trickies. So just about how to best take notes, assess while doing everything else. We did talk about kind of a couple different layouts in our conferring workshop. Some things that people have done is, it depends on how tech savvy you are and where you want to take those notes, but having individual student pages that you're writing down things that they're working on in their goal setting. One of the ideas that Jody gave yesterday was having a receipt book. And so if you are writing down a goal or something that you want the student to work on or that you've talked about in conferring, you tear it off and give it to them, but you also have a carbon copy. How to best take notes is kind of, it's a pretty personal thing. If that person wants to hang back, we can give you some other ideas. But also assessing while doing everything else. And so we are going to give you a couple different ideas today on what some of the formative assessment looks like. And yeah, again, during your conferring is where you're going to get a little bit of information, and we'll talk about that, what that triangulation of data looks like. So it is just honestly probably sometimes taking notes or looking at what your observations are and the conversations that you're having with those students. How to organize it so it is usable down the road. I'm not quite sure if somebody wants to elaborate on that a little bit, organize the rubrics or what specifically on that one. The rubrics, continuums, and writers workshop seem to be very high. Yes. So writers workshop is meant to be built vertically. So the idea is that students start in kindergarten, in full day kindergarten, doing writers workshop. So once you get into a few grades up, yes, the expectations are quite high. So in that respect, don't be afraid to use samples or checklists or anything at a grade lower, and we will address that today. When it comes to the rubric specifically and relating it to our curriculum, that's what our session is about primarily tomorrow. So definitely come tomorrow. Sometimes I have trouble narrowing down what I'm reading through and end up reading through a lot of content. Yes, and so we'll talk about what to read and when. Great question. Continuums, have the kids place themselves. Yeah, we'll talk about the continuum today. And Davies, yes, we're going to talk about the triangulation of data. Love it. Differentiating for instruction by using assessment, absolutely. And knowing what to teach next. Okay, so we're going to go back into our presentation. And if you do have any other questions, please put them in the chat, because if we don't address them in our presentation, what we do is we usually follow up within some answers within the email. If you're just joining us today as your first session, what we have been talking a lot about is the cycle of workshop. And so today we're looking specifically at what assessment might look like. We can talk about, and we will talk a little bit about how assessment can fall within the mini lesson. And then a lot of the time is going to fall within that time, independent writing time, where you're going to be conferring with students. So if we look at Ann Davies' work with the triangulation of data, it's not just about the products and that one piece of writing that you're taking and looking at. It's also about making observations and having conversations with students. The conversations piece is happening a lot when you're conferring either with students individually, in pairs, or in small groups. And then the observation piece is going to happen all of the time. So if we look at observations specifically, that's something that's going to happen throughout. We're going to look at maybe how students within the mini lessons are talking to their partners or understanding the topic. Observations, obviously, when we're conferring and what we're seeing come out of their writing. Conversations, we're going to see in the mini lesson, the conferring. In the mini lesson specifically, it's going to be in that partner share, or when you're circulating around when students are brainstorming ideas. It's a really, really good time to just take note of what students are doing. So an example is if you were in our session with the mini lesson, we did a mini lesson demo on a small moment. And if the student's like, my small moment is growing up in Bicycle, that's not a small moment, right? So it's something really quickly that you can observe and a conversation that you can have with a student. In terms of products, these are things that when you want to look at some products of student work, you're going to look in their notebooks or their folders. When I say folders, it's their little pieces of writing for the younger grades. Notebooks will start in grade 3. We're definitely one of the products that you want to look at in terms of assessment is the on-demand. We're going to talk about that next. as well as the published work. So they're going to end their unit with a published piece of writing. And that's another thing that you can look at in some specific aspects. So writing pathways, when we say writing pathways, this is everything to do with assessment. And so in your boxed kit, you will actually see a book that's called Writing Pathways. Everything that we talk about today is in that book. And then the book is awesome because it tells you like the how and the why. So when it talks about the on-demand, how to administer the on-demand, what the specifics are, talking about the rubrics, learning progressions, it explains what the learning progressions are for you. And then when you go online, you're going to go into the writing pathways section, and that's where all of your resources are going to be. So I'm going to take you in there right now. Oops. So if I just open my resources, I'm just using grade 2 as an example. I'm going to scroll down to pathways. And then within pathways, you're going to see your learning progressions within the genre of opinion writing, your on-demand performance assessment prompt, rubrics, checklists, student writing samples, writing developed through the progression. So that was or 2 sessions ago, we talked about how that's an annotated piece of writing so that you can actually see what a writer in grade 2 is doing and what are some look-fors perhaps within that piece of writing to help boost your understanding of some things to look for and that you might see in a piece of writing. And then again, this repeats for all of the genres. And then at the very end, there's some additional materials, and we're not really going to get into those specifics right now. But again, writing pathways is where you want to go and where you're going to find all of these things within your book, within your box, or online.
And I want to say something. When I started using the Writers Workshop, I did get overwhelmed because we're going to share with you many tools like learning, progression, the rubric, there's different tools that you can use. Our goal today is not to overwhelm you. We want you to look at what makes sense in your practice. Pick one, start with that, and then see how the other tools can add it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't feel that if you're starting Writers Workshop in September that you need to use all of those tools. You don't.
No, absolutely not. Okay, so the first tool that we're going to talk about is called the on-demand performance assessment. So what it is it's a writing prompt that's given to the entire class that the students use to compose a piece of writing for the teacher to see, to look at, to assess. The writing prompt is genre specific, so each unit or those COIL books, there will be a specific writing prompt for it. Then once you've given the prompt and then there's some specifics of what you want, you have the students write within a block of time and then you take that. So the idea with the on-demand piece of writing is there's two times that you would use it. First of all, you're going to use it for your baseline assessment, your diagnostic assessment, as well as your formative assessment. So what are you going to do with it moving forward? And as well as norming. We're going to get into a little bit more details with norming after, but also it's everybody's writing about the same thing based off of the same prompt. So what a great opportunity for all the grade 2 teachers to get together to look at what the writing looks like within that grade, within your school. And then you're going to use it as a piece of summative assessment as well. So you're going to have an on-demand at the beginning of a unit before it even starts, and an on-demand at the end. So when I say on-demand, it is what it sounds like. It's on demand. So right away, like the teacher says, today you're going to write about this. Here are the things that you need to keep in mind. You have 30 minutes to write. Go. So we were trying, because on demand is kind of a weird term, and demand is not maybe the best words. Like it's like an on the spot assessment, perhaps. The way that I kind of make my analogy is like those cooking shows. I think it's called Iron Chef. I'm not huge into cooking shows, but the person's given a bunch of ingredients, and at the end they have to have like a dish that they make. So think of this the same. So the teacher is giving them the ingredients. So here's an example of a prompt. The teacher is giving them the ingredients, and then at the end they have to cook something. So in this case, the prompt is, think of a topic or issue that you know and care about, an issue around which you have strong feelings. Tomorrow you'll have 45 minutes to write an opinion or argument text in which you will write your opinion or claim. And so the entire thing you're going to read to them. Then specifically you're going to say, in your writing, make sure you name your opinion, give reasons and evidence to explain, and write an ending. So in your cooking, make sure you have to use shrimp, pepper, and I don't know, green onion. So what you're doing is you're giving them specifics because you want to see what they're going to use, take or make or write with what you've given them.
And you're giving them an amount of time, 30 minutes. I think on the minutes 45.
Yes. And so, you know, at the beginning of grade 1, are we going to have students writing for 45 minutes about a topic that they care about? No. They're going to write till they're finished. But this is really important because everybody is given the same prompt to write about. And then you're going to take that and you're going to see what your writers look like at the beginning of the unit. First of all, what do they know about this genre? So this is an opinion writing genre prompt, for example. And then secondly, what does their writing look like based off of that? Do they actually have an opinion in there? Did they write an ending? And so you use this as your baseline assessment of where students are at. You'll see if you look up the actual prompts, and I can show you specifically what one would look like. Here we go. So here is what the assessment prompt would look like. So here is what I was reading. I didn't read the whole thing to you. You can do that on your own time, but here's the prompt. And then for students in K-2, here's what you're going to say in your writing, make sure you. And so I write this on the board. It's something that I'll keep reiterating if the students can't read this. So if like K1 students at the beginning of the year, for example. And then for students in grades 3 and up, then you're going to ask for a little bit more. One thing with the on-demand is there's a difference between K2 and 3 to 8. Not only are you asking for more evidence, you're also asking for them to think about it. So in this state, like tomorrow, you'll have 45 minutes to write about. For students in grades 3 and up, you're going to give them a day to actually go and to think about what they're going to write about. Some students are going to be super keen and they're going to look stuff up if it's an information piece, for example. Some students are going to completely forget and it's not going to be helpful at all.
So just hold on one second, Lauren. So me, if I'm thinking, and I'm thinking on Sally's question from yesterday, from a teacher perspective, it's like, what's the purpose of this? One, this is your baseline data that you're going to use. As a teacher, because I think, Sally, your comment was like, that's a lot of reading and assessing. The goal is not to read in depth every piece of writing. You can use a process called the thin slicing. We'll talk about that a bit later. But the idea is that you take all those on-demand writing, you do 3 piles. Students who got it, like your average class, kids who are struggling, and kids who are the strong writer. This, and there's different ways of doing the thin slicing, but if you're just dividing it in 3 general piles, you as a teacher gives you that quick overview. Oh, this is, if I'm looking at my pile of struggling writers, these are the students that when we start, I need to start conferring with those kids. You're not going to write, like, and when you do the thin slicing, you can look at it looking at the 4 piece of writing, or you can look at it just with one thing in mind. Okay, I'm looking just at the structure. So you're taking all your assessment and you're going to pile them in 3 different piles, just looking at the structure, beginning, middle, and end. You might redo the same process looking at organization of the text. But the idea is that you're not looking at everything. You're not marking at anything. It's just something for you as a teacher to start with, to go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the on-demand is a prompt that you use at the beginning of a unit to understand where your writers are at. And then you're going to use it at the end of the unit, the exact same prompt, the exact same instructions to see how they've grown. So obviously at the beginning of a unit, say an opinion piece of writing in grade 1, you might get a word. right? But at the end of the unit, they're going to know what an opinion piece of writing is, and they're going to be able to give you something. And so the really important thing about the end of the term on demand is you can see that growth. That's a huge amount of growth that you're going to be able to see. And they're also going to understand what that genre means and writing within that genre a little bit better. So yeah, let's just have a chat. So what is resonating with you right now about this? Have you used it? Does it sound like something that you think is a good idea? Questions specific maybe to your grade? We'll give you a couple minutes just to give us a little bit of.
You can use the mic or use a chat box.
Mm-hmm.
As we are waiting, must be a very quiet crowd again, Lauren.
Yes, I know.
Oh, but we definitely love the idea of behind it. One thing that I love about the on-demand writing, as Lauren said, you do it at the beginning and you do it at the end of the unit. At the end of the unit, that becomes your summative assessment. This is what you are assessing. You're not necessarily going to just assess the published piece. We'll talk about it in the 2 minutes, because the published piece, you've given so much support. It has been lifted by all the comments, but the beginning on demand and the end on demand, students didn't receive any support at all. So it's really their true abilities, their true skills. What I love about this, I'm thinking on my blueprint, this would be a fantastic my blueprint entry where students get to compare both entries and that you can really see the progress between those weeks. Something that I want to go back to go ahead.
Yeah, there's just a question. So yeah, Juliana, I think that Julie just addressed your question about can they look at the beginning and the end? Absolutely, for them to see that growth. One of the other questions just about grade 1, I'm assuming this needs some time as the start of the year to get into. Some grade 1s have extremely little letter sound correspondence. Absolutely. And so what you might see at the beginning of the year, so 2 things with that, you know, they recommend that you start writer's workshop as soon as you can. If you need to give a little bit of time to get an idea of where your students are at, absolutely. Grade 1 is kind of a different animal. It's their first full day school. There's a lot of kind of overlapping things. Also though, in an example of one of the things in the prompt is beginning, middle, and end. A student might not even have any letter sound associations, but do they understand if they were to draw pictures that there's a beginning, a middle, and end and what that sequence looks like? And so what you might see out of a beginning of the grade year grade 1 student is going to look very different. Some students might actually be taking risks and trying to write words based off of sounds. Some students might be doing scribbles. Some students might just be drawing pictures. And so, yes, it's what a great tool regardless to get some information from them, right? So asking them and to see if those students even have letter sound correspondence.
I'm thinking on Jacqueline's comment about like, it's a fast way. It sounds nice and manageable. Little insight about me, I hated teaching writing. I don't like writing myself, but I hated teaching it because I felt that every piece of writing I was asking to do, I had to take back and write comments on everything and analyzing everything. And that's what takes so much time. But using this thin slicing where I'm looking only at one thing, that's what makes it way more manageable. And I'm thinking from a student's perspective, and instead of getting back my copy with comments all over, like it's overwhelming. As a student, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to work on. So just being as specific as we can, I think that's super important. So it will actually help you saving times. Something else I want to add, Lauren, before we move on is the on-demand piece should not take you much time. 45 minutes to give to your students, and then at the end for your marking should not take less than an hour, because all you're doing is piling them, right? So it should not take you too much time.
Okay, so just last question. So Paula Caselli, we're going to talk about your question right now. Would you set it up at the beginning? Don't have to expect them to be good at this. Absolutely. And especially for the younger grades. If you don't even know how to write words yet, writers, that's okay. You can try, you can draw pictures. I want you to show me what you know about writing a story, right? And so giving them just a little bit more support and at the beginning, absolutely you can.
Especially, Lauren, this is a good point. Sorry, it's such a good question. Especially with the younger grade, and your ELL students, your French immersion, or just your struggling writer, we strongly recommend. Remember that thing about the sketching that I showed you? If the kids for that on-demand or any piece of writing don't know the words, sketch first, add the label. So if that's all they can do for that on-demand, fantastic, because you're going to compare to the last on-demand at the end of the unit, and hopefully you will say, hey, look at buddy, you had to use your sketching and you use 10 labels, but now at the end, your end piece, you were able to write me 3 sentences. That's amazing, right? Like, so it's that progress.
Okay, so just to look at where we're at here. So your initial on-demand, it happens before the beginning of the unit. So say you're gonna start with the narrative unit, which is generally where you would start. Before you even do your first mini lesson, you're going to do the on-demand. You're gonna give them the prompt with the specifics and let them write so you can take a look. If they don't know, because once students get into grade 2 and 3, assuming that they've had writer's workshop before, they're gonna have a little bit more writing language in the sense that like they know what an opinion piece of writing is, they know what an information piece of writing is. But if you feel like they don't even know what the genre means, like narrative, if you use a word like narrative at the beginning of grade 1, the kids are gonna have no clue what you're talking about. Teach them what it means. Teach them what that genre means before you give them the on-demand. So that's your diagnostic assessment. And now you're gonna understand their pre-instruction skills, where they are at, their absolute baseline. So as Julie had said, using the thin slicing protocol. So I went through this with a teacher this year. She did the narrative on-demand prompt, and it was for a higher grade, but right away, just by looking physically at the paper, based off of the grade, the students were writing 1 or 2 sentences when they should have been writing a paragraph, right? So automatically she knew that their stamina was not there, that their ability to write long passages was not there. And then also, because it was about a small moment, one student just listed what they did over the holidays. They obviously don't understand what a small moment is, and that listing. So there was no really flow in their story. And so we did not read every word of every piece of writing, but we were able to see really quickly that the motivation was like, so what she took from it, just by going through the process together, was her students don't have a lot of stamina in writing and they're not motivated writers. And so did they have a lot of issues with like paragraph and sentence structure and all of those things? Yes, but those are the things that she took out based off of her thin slicing, and those are the things that she really needed to address. Here are students that aren't even writing complete sentences. Maybe that's a group that I'm going to come up with right away. And then again, at the very end of the unit, after you've gone through all of your mini lessons, you're going to give them the exact same prompt again. And then you're going to be able to see the progress in that writing for that genre. Now you're going to reflect on the student growth. Here's where you're going to use something like a rubric. Now, a couple people have talked about the published piece of writing, because we've talked about you're going to have a celebration at the end. You want the students, when you do an entire unit, to have a polished, beautiful piece of writing. Now, the big thing, the one thing I want you to take home from this is your published piece of writing is not assessed summatively. The reason is based off of the rubric. So the reason behind that is that published lifted piece of writing, you've worked on it a lot with them. You've conferred with them. You've shown them mentor text. You've given ideas back and forth. They've tried a couple things. So what we say is it's lifted over time. And so because there's a lot of feedback given, there's a lot of maybe like partner work, examples, rewriting, editing, all of those things, that's a lifted piece that's not 100% students' ability on their own. And so the key there is that that's not their one summative piece of writing that you're pulling out. That's the on-demand, the summative on-demand. The published piece, you want to look at the things like the checklist and the writing process progressions. We'll talk about the writing progressions later, but you want to look at their process and their ability to use things like editing and to revise and to reflect on their own writing. Those are the things that you want to look at rather than their actual core writing abilities. So the published work is not used as that summative piece of how they can write. Okay, so that was on demand. Now we are going to talk about student self-assessment. So that's your assessment of student ability. But what we want to do is we want to start early. We want to start and support students in that metacognitive piece. We want them to know what they're working on. And I think the most powerful thing when I started looking into and learning about Writers Workshop, and then my conferring guy, Carl Anderson, was with him having these conversations with students and for them to be able to self-assess and have that metacognitive piece, the language that was coming out of these young students was astounding to me. And so, you know, for a grade 1 student to say, well, I feel like my lead is really strong, but I want to work on my transitions in my story. Like for a grade 1 student, like I would never expect a grade 1 student to write like or talk like that. But what we want to do is we want to support that. And the way that
Lauren,
we do that.
I just want to clarify this too. So now we're not talking about on-demand writing. On-demand writing is just that piece that you're asking at the beginning and at the end. This self-assessment checklist is something that you're using throughout the unit on all the different pieces of writing that your students are doing.
So this is where the students are starting to see what skills that they are able to do and what they're working at as writers. And because it's written in the I piece, so I tried to make a beginning for my story. I put pages in order. It increases their accountability. And so then now they need to look at what are they doing as a writer. And so the beautiful thing about this assessment checklist as well is that they are able to, for you, it's a really great jumping off point for where you can start your conferring piece. Because I know that there was a lot of questions about conferring and what do you work on and what do you do. And so this is a really good way to support the beginning of conferring, because as you saw in the video, if you were here yesterday, you know, how's it going with your writing? It's good. Is there anything you're working on? No. But if you give them something like a checklist like this, then they are kind of, you're encouraging them to think a little bit more in depth about their writing. And so this is also how you and they will monitor their progress towards a goal. So perhaps a student is working on something specific, like a lead or an ending. And then together you're creating what your next steps might be. They are grade specific. And so I know that there's been a couple of questions about how they, there's a lot of kind of higher level writing expected with Writers Workshop. And yes, that's very true. The one nice thing is that you can use any of the checklists. So you can use the kindergarten checklist, or you can use the grade 1 checklist. So a couple ideas surrounding that, just to help kind of student self-esteem, is take the grade off. So on the top here, where you can see it says grade 1, just take this whole piece off. Another example that we heard today that I loved, that I hadn't heard before, was you know, the kindergarten one will be pink, the grade 1 will be yellow, the grade 2 will be green, whatever. And then so they're color coded and there's nothing to do with grade at all. And so students are just working on the checklist, that's the green checklist or whatever it is. And so because you're going to have such a span of writers in your class, it's not to say that everybody's going to be working on that grade 1 checklist.
Something that I want to add about the checklist, Lauren, is something that we've discussed. I'm looking at Sally's comment about it can be overwhelming, totally overwhelming. Reading all of those comments, it's like, and like, I'll give the example of my son last week. He had to do a checklist for his piece of writing. And honestly, all he did was check, 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 check. And I'm telling you a secret, there's a column for the parents to fill out. And what did I do? Check, 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 check. Didn't have a time, could care less. Like that was just not a priority because I didn't see the purpose. And I think when you're asking students to do that self-assessment, you want those students, you want to share the purpose. Why is this going to help you as a writer to do this? Again, super, super good piece that you could do as a blueprint task where students are asked to do the self-check as an oral piece where they're talking about it. Also, I would ask students, okay, you're showing me, you're saying that I tried to make a beginning for my story. If that's what you tried, I want you to use Post-it, show me, put a Post-it exactly on your text where you try to do this. So I think that will help them making it more more pinpointing with this, making it more interactive, but also the overwhelm. You may not want to focus on all those checklists. It might be only a few. One thing that we had suggested earlier at the other session with the higher grade was to do a gallery walk. You could have all the students writing on their desk, and you ask students to walk around with a Post-it, and they need to leave comments using the checklist, for example. But then to make it less overwhelming, I could be the one in charge of walking around and giving comments on the lead. So my job, I'm the lead expert. So I'm going to quickly read. I'm not reading the full story of each of my friends. I'm reading just the lead, just the beginning, and I'm going to comment 1, 2, 3. Did they get it? Are they there? Or are they not there yet? Mm-hmm. However, Lauren, she's doing the same thing as me, but she's the expert of the ending. So she's analyzing. So that might be different ways to make it a bit more manageable.
Yeah.
Can I just add 2 things? Another suggestion or tip would be to chunk the rubric. So like Julie's saying, you could go and do a gallery walk, but maybe you're only going to give 1 or 2 sections to your kids at a time. So they're not looking at the checklist in its entirety. And the other thing that is really important is that you're modeling how to use these checklists so that it doesn't just become a tick, 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 but rather that you're taking the checklist, you're showing students how they can use it with their own writing, with your writing, with the mentor texts that you've been utilizing, and how the different pieces, so you're going to model how that checklist is being used for them, so that when they go to do it themselves, it's not like they're just handed the checklist and expected to figure out what to do with it.
Okay, and the frequency, is asking about the frequency of using the checklist. I think it depends on the student's needs. Like it should not necessarily every week, definitely not. And to me, whenever I use stuff like this, I need a purpose. There's something, Lauren, you wanted to
add? And as Jody was saying that, you know, just taking pieces of it. So an example that you could do would be, take just the lead piece out. Take that one little piece out of the checklist, paste it into your notebook. Here's what you're going to work on today. Here's what we're going to look for in your writing. And if you feel like you have a piece of writing that you can go back to where you did a really good job of this, so just one little piece. Maybe it's just the lead or just the transitions.
Yeah. Okay, let's move to the next. So the next slide, what we're going to do is we're going to put you in breakout room. I think I've assigned everyone. What we're asking you to do is 2 things. Once, I will, maybe Lauren, you could do this as I'm talking. Lauren is going to copy the link in the chat box to the grade level sample. In that folder, we have given you access to some of the same writing sample that we used with you last time, but also some of the checklists attached to that sample of writing. So we're going to give you 5 to 10 minutes just to chat with people at your grade team. So you can do 2 things. One is look at the writing samples that we give you and use a checklist and just discuss how you would use that checklist with that piece of writing, or just chat about the checklist itself. How would you use this? What is feasible? Taking on your class, what is feasible? What would it add to your practice? So I'm going to split you right now, and we will see you we'll see you back in this room in about.
Okay, so some really good conversations about using the checklists. We realize that we're moving through all this really quick. We'll show you kind of the diagram that we made at the end. So the next piece that we can use for assessment that we're going to talk about are called the learning progressions. These progressions are based on...
Lauren, let's wait a bit. We're still missing in the breakout rooms. Let's just wait a few more seconds.
Oh, okay.
We only have 10 people.
Still in the breakout
because they
rooms.
still had the 1 minute.
Right.
All the rooms are
okay.
closing.
Oh, there we go. Okay, yeah, there we go. Okay, so we've talked about the on-demand and we've talked about the student self-assessment checklists. The next thing that we're going to talk about, and the final thing we'll talk about today, are the learning progressions. So the learning progressions are genre specific or unit specific, And essentially what it is, it's a continuum that shows how writing skills develop from one grade to the next. The idea here is to understand how writing develops, but also how you can move students forward in their writing. So one of the most powerful things that you can do with this tool is just to look at it and to see, first of all, what is included in the genre for narrative writing and how it progresses over time. So if you're a grade 3 teacher, to see where kindergarten students are going to start, and then what they're going to be building up to get to grade 3, and things that you're going to want to support them to push them when they go into grade 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a way to use these learning progressions that I learned that I absolutely love.
And as Lauren is setting up her iPad to share her screen, something that I love about those learning progression, to me, I see these as a continuum. In my class, even though we may say, oh, I teach grade 2. Well, that's not true. In your class, you don't have grade 2 students. You've got kids who are on a continuum at different places, depending on the skills. So that continuum, that learning progression is just a super great tool for you as a teacher to know what are the wherever the student is on the continuum, knowing that, okay, when we're talking about lead, this is where your skill is. Here's the next step. I'll let you take over, Lauren.
Okay, so when you get the progression, it's a huge document. So it'll start pre-K, it'll go to grade 6, I believe these ones will too. And so looking at it out of the gates, it's a lot. But one thing that you can do to support your understanding of how to help students, because one of the big questions that came up last session in conferring is, I don't know what to tell them, or I don't know what they need to work on, or I don't know what I need to do to push them forward. You can use this tool absolutely in that way. So here is just a cutout of grade 1 to 3 from the opinion writing learning progressions. So one of the activities that you can do is look what the difference is between the grades. So I'm going to walk you through that right now. So if we look, so just because I had to cut it out, the titles are on the side. So overall, what does this genre look like? What does the lead look like? What are the transitions? So if we look at grade 1, overall, the writer wrote her opinion or her likes and dislikes and said why. Moving into grade 2, the writer wrote her opinion or her likes and dislikes and gave reasons. Okay, so that's new. Going down to the lead, the writer wrote a beginning in which he got readers' attention. He named the topic or text he was writing about and gave his opinion. Moving into grade 2, what we might expect or see is the writer wrote a beginning in which he not only gave his opinion, but also set readers up to expect that his writing would try to convince them of it. Okay, and we'll do just one more into transitions. The writer said more about her opinion and used words such as and because. The writer connected more than just said parts of her piece using words as also other because. So that's something that I can even just do. Here's the difference, right? Also other because. So sorry, that one was the same, but here's the new words. Now, so say you're a grade 2 teacher and you feel as though your students are doing these things. What are some ways that I can now push into, or what are the differences now that I'm seeing in grade 3? So I'm going to read you, I'm going to start here. So the writer wrote her opinion or her likes and dislikes and gave reasons. But now into grade 3, we're expecting them to talk about their opinion and ideas and help them on a text or a topic. So opinion and ideas, right? So here it was just like opinion to help them understand their reasons, right? So this is like a way to support, to help them understand. If we keep going, so the writer wrote a beginning, gave his opinion, set up readers to expect, try to convince them of it. Let's look at what grade 3 says. The writer wrote a beginning in which he not only set readers up to expect, this would be a piece of put in your writing, but also tried to hook them into caring about their opinion. So that's a huge difference in the lead, right? And so when we look at a piece of grade 2 writing, and for the people that were in the grade 2 group, when we look at the lead of that writer, for example, they just said, I'm going to tell you about why my friend is awesome because he's nice to me, or whatever it was. Whereas now the way we could push that student forward, if they were in grade 3, for example, is what's a hook? What's a way that we really want to get them in? So if we could start with a piece of dialogue, or like an action word, or a piece of a story, right? A really small snippet. So what does a hook look like? So that's going to be the way that you move that student forward within the genre to make their lead stronger. And then you can just keep going. So the writer connected parts of their story, and now they're using examples. So that's huge, right? And here are the new words. Example, and again, because is our kind of overarching word. Also, so the key here is now the student is not only connecting, but they're using examples within their connection. So a really good way to look at is, if you are a grade 2 teacher, what's the leap from grade 1 to grade 2, or even like K to 1, 1 to 2? Because like Julie said, you're going to have this huge span of writers. And you really want to know how to support them and what it looks like and how you can kind of move forward with that. So we are going to.
We've got only 3 minutes,
Yes.
Lauren.
So what we're gonna do, if you have, we're just gonna. Oops, sorry.
Go to the last slide with the.
Yeah. So I'll just say one thing about rubrics. Rubrics, we're using those for summative assessment. We're going to talk about all of that tomorrow, because it's not. Yeah, we're going to talk about it all tomorrow. That's all I have to say about that. Please come tomorrow, because we're going to connect it with our curriculum.
That's our hook, to make sure.
That's our hook. Nailed it. Okay, so finally, we talked about a ton of things today. We understand that we have such a short amount of time with you. So what we did is we summarized a little bit. Today, we talked about the on-demand at the beginning of the unit, at the end of the unit. So we gave you, so why would you use it? When would you use it? We talked about student checklist. We talked about learning progressions. We've talked within conferring about goal setting, when we would do that. These are going to be very, very tightly connected. And then we talked again about that celebration. That's that celebration piece that the students are going to write and really work on. And then why we do it and what we're going to use with it. So this is, if anything, a really good snapshot of what we talked about incredibly quickly today. But going back, when you're like, oh, I wonder, like, what's a way that I can support a student being more reflective? Oh, I'm going to go back. Yes, there's checklists. I'm going to go back and look into those. So,
and as I said, as a learner, because you're a learner in this, don't feel that you need to use them all. Use what makes sense, what helps you as a teacher.
Mm-hmm. So tomorrow is our last session. Tomorrow, what we had planned on was talking about how we can connect those rubrics, Connect Writers Workshop, because it is an American resource, to the Alberta curriculum. So we're going to talk to that tomorrow, as well about what that final celebration looks like. But because tomorrow is our last session, and of course we'll follow up with you if there's things specific to your school, to your grade, to your classroom that you would want to talk about, please reach out. But if there's anything that you would really like, that you feel like is missing, or that you really want spoken about, please put it, in the chat, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, Papa.
I would use the checklist. I'm looking at Paula's question. I would use the checklist that goes with that grade. For Power School. Yes, Sally, we're addressing that tomorrow.
Is Henrietta Meir Edwards. She grew up with a family that valued culture and.
So yes, feel free. Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like us to discuss tomorrow?
I think Paula asked her question twice, and I think I answered it up top, but if it hasn't been talked about, if you use a grade lower kit, yes, you're going to use the grade 3 checklist, the one that matches the grade of the unit. However, knowing your students, you can use the checklist that's appropriate for them. So if you're a grade 3 teacher and you're using the grade 2 unit, but you have a student who you think falls a little bit better into the grade 1 checklist, then you use the grade 1 checklist. So it's definitely more fluid, but just because they're in grade 4 using the grade 3 unit, it doesn't mean that you have to, you still use the grade 4 checklist.
So it's 2:31. We are going to stay online for the next little while. So feel free to stay if you have questions. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, hopefully. If you have any suggestion tonight of things that you want us to address, send us an email or add it to the chat box. But otherwise, we will see you tomorrow, guys. Thank you for joining us.
I love Sally's always hard-hitting questions here. We're going to talk about the rubric tomorrow and real-time reporting and